Good afternoon, Soundra sir. This is Dr. Ramya from SRM. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Welcome, sir. We just wait for another 5 minutes and then start, sir, first. We just wait for 2 minutes. Good afternoon, sir. Can I start the session?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Yes, sir. Uh, Welcome all of you on behalf of Department of Language, Culture and Society, College of Engineering and Technology, SRM Institute of Science and Technology, and Department of Linguistics, Tetso College, Dimapur, Nagaland. So we are pleased to have you all for this 6 days online faculty development program titled Narratives of Change, Reimagining English Language and Literature as a Mirror of Cultural and Intellectual Transformation, NEP 2020 and Viksit Bharat 2047. Today is our third session, and we have with us Dr. Somjyoti Mrida, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Northeastern Hill University, Shillong, Meghalaya. He is with us to talk or discuss on situating Anglophone Kashmiri literature within Indian writing in English, interrogating nation, narration, and inclusion. Sir, his areas of interest are post-colonial studies, ideas of nation and nationalism, Indian English literature, and literatures of Kashmir conflict. We have with us Dr. Somjyoti Mrida, who will be discussing on the said topic. Sir, the platform is all yours.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Yeah. At the outset, I would like to thank SRM Institute of Science and Technology and also Tetso College Sovima for this kind invitation for delivering this lecture. And of course, special thanks to Madam Yansu Benin Agwil and Dr. S. Ramya for their collaboration and cooperation. They have been constantly in touch for the last couple of days. So without further delay, I shall begin my lecture. But before I begin, I would like to request that in case I become inaudible or, any kind of technical glitches, kindly, let me know. Thank you. So I shall begin, ma'am.
I'll stop sharing my screen, sir, so it will be easy for you to do your screen
Okay,
share.
thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so the title of my lecture is, the title of my lecture is Situating Anglophone Kashmiri Literature, Writing within Indian English, Situating Anglophone Kashmiri Literature within Indian English Literature, Interrogating Nation, Narration, and Inclusion. So I shall begin with a quote from Aga Shahid Ali's poem, The Blessed Word, a prologue. And I'm quoting, "Let me cry out in that void, say it as I can. I write on that void, Kashmir, 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 or Kachumar in a sea of stories, or Kakmir, Kashmir, 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 Kashmir." Now, these are, of course, very different pronunciations and words of Kashmir, how the word evolved. I would also like to quote a short quotation from Basharat Peer's memoir, Curfewed Nights, and I'm quoting, "I had a sense of the alienation and resentment most Kashmiri Muslims felt and had against Indian rule. We did not relate to the symbols of Indian nationalism, the flag, the national anthem, the cricket team. We followed every cricket match India and Pakistan played, but we never cheered for the India team." End quote. This is from Basharat Peer's memoir, Curfewed Nights. These two quotations, the first one from Aga Shahid Ali's collection of poems, The Country Without a Post Office, and the second one from Basharat Peer's Curfewed Nights, reflects the political ideology and predicament of Kashmiris in the aftermath of armed rebellion against the Indian state since 1989. These two literary works are also crucial in the context of literary representation of conflict-ridden Kashmir, since both the works precede a plethora of literary works in their respective genres. While Ali's poems reflect the anxieties and pathos of Kashmiri existence in the midst of a protracted armed conflict, Peer comments on the sense of alienation and disaffection subscribed by the Kashmiris towards the Indian state. In the context of Kashmir, cultural productions, including literature, has emerged as a site of contestation between stakeholders with conflicting interests. In recent times, Kashmiri Anglophone literature has emerged as a distinctive genre which strives to aestheticize the ideological moorings of the Kashmiri movement for Azadi from the Indian state. This paper
Sorry
primarily...
to interrupt.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you sharing your screen? Because we are not able to see. I just wanted to ask that.
No, ma'am. I'm not.
No.
I'm not actually.
Okay,
I hope that's all right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Okay.
This paper primarily focuses on the narration of the Kashmiri nation and the representation of political events of 1947 as narrated in recent Anglophone Kashmiri literary narratives like Curfewed Nights by Basharat Peer, which was published in 2008, The Collaborator by Mirza Wahid, published in 2011, Our Moon Has Blood Clots by Rahul Pandita, published in 2013, The Half Mother by Shahnaz Bashir, published in 2014. It elaborates on the discourses of dissent/resistance that remains the hallmark of Anglophone Kashmiri literature, thereby problematizing its incorporation within the broader rubric of Indian English literature. The paper interrogates the legitimacy of national literature as a valid category of distinct genre and the modalities of its formation in the context of Indian English literature. Now, I will talk a bit about in Anglophone Kashmiri literature and its evolution. Kashmiri nationalist struggle began in the early 20th century, organizing resistance against the economic exploitation of Kashmiri Muslim peasants by the Jammu-based Dogra regime. The movement gained momentum by the 1930s and made political alliances with the Indian National Congress, then spearheading Indian nationalist struggle against the British colonial regime. With the British Empire retreating from the subcontinent, the Dogra Kingdom was dissolved and the state of Jammu and Kashmir became a part of the Indian Union in 1947 through the instrument of accession signed by Maharaja Hari Singh of Kashmir. Their mass leader, Sheikh Abdullah of National Conference, was in support of Kashmir's inclusion during the foundational moment of cartographic reorganization of the Indian subcontinent. By mid-1950s, Kashmiri nationalism spearheaded its resistance against the Indian state. Kashmiri nationalism took a turn towards violence with the establishment of Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, JKLF, which was founded by Amanullah Khan and Maqbul Bhatt in 1977. Since 1989, Kashmiri movement for self-determination turned into a full-scale armed rebellion with massive popular support in Kashmir Valley. Though militancy waned in the valley by the turn of the century, it led to novel forms of civil disobedience in the form of massive street protests, as well as stone pelting directed against symbols of Indian state, such as Indian Army personnel, etc. The political ramifications of the recent abrogation of Article 370 and Article 35A of the Indian Constitution, which was done in August 2019, and the demotion of the state to a union territory is yet to unfold. In a bid to curve a distinct territory and identity for itself, Kashmiri nationalism got enmeshed in the power struggle of two embattled nation states, that is India and Pakistan, and their different, almost contradictory brands of official nationalism. Eminent scholar Ashutosh Varshney stated that, and I'm quoting, at its core, the Kashmir problem is a result of three forces: religious nationalism represented by Pakistan, secular nationalism epitomized by India, and ethnic nationalism embodies in what Kashmiris call Kashmiriyat, being a Kashmiri, which basically means being a Kashmiri. Internal inconsistencies, contradictions, and paradoxes mark all three, end quote. Kashmiri nationalism is not a unified movement spearheaded by a single organization, but a diversified movement with varying political strategies, not always working towards a common goal. In this highly politicized socio-political scenario, Kashmiri literature has evolved as an arena of struggle where Anglophone pro-Azadi Kashmiri literature bolster Kashmiri claims of Azadi while literary narratives by Kashmiri Pandits, non-Kashmiri Indians, and Indian army personnel validate Indian claims on Kashmir. The politics of the embattled valley almost always overwhelms the aesthetic quotient of Anglophone Kashmiri literature. Kashmiri Anglophone literature has to undertake the difficult task of representing an armed conflict in medias res, catering to a polarized public sphere and a widely dispersed reading public comprising of stakeholders with conflicting interests and political/national affiliations. Kashmir conflict has produced Anglophone literary corpus of its own. The Kabyle invasion of 1948 led to fictional rendering of the event by both Indian and foreign authors. British novelist H.E. Bates wrote The Scarlet Sword, which was published in 1950, commemorating the destruction and desecration of St. Joseph's Mission in Baramulla. According to Andrew Whitehead, a scholar of Kashmiri literature, The Rage of the Vulture by Alan Moorhead, which was published in 1948, is also based on Kabyle invasion of Baramulla. Though Moorhead's novel is set in Kandahar, Mulk Raj Anand wrote Death of a Hero, Epitaph for Maqbul Sherwani, which was published in 1963, eulogizing Maqbul Sherwani's efforts thwarting the invaders from entering Srinagar. Death of a Hero is a significant literary moment since it is the first Indian English novel solely devoted to the task of representing Kashmir as a constituent part of post-colonial Indian state. Krishna Mehta's Kashmir Par Hamla, published in Hindi by Sasta Sahitya Mandal, Government of India, was translated in English and published by Signet Press, Calcutta in 1954. It is the only literary account of the Kashmir situation of 1948 written by a Kashmiri and has been recently resurrected in 2005 and the book has been retitled as Kashmir, 1947, A Survivor's Story. And this book has been republished by Penguin. Though the corpus is not voluminous, yet it is significant for political reasons. The literary narratives remain the only fictional rendition of Kashmir at the cusp of political transformation and its incorporation into the Indian nation state. This corpus is negligible compared to the literary rendition of the armed conflict since the 1990s by Kashmiris, non-Kashmiri Indians, and foreign authors. The Srinagar Conspiracy, which was by Bikram Chandra, which was published in 2000, precedes a plethora of Indian English novels representing armed insurgency in Kashmir. Most of the texts dealt with in this presentation are in English. In recent years, Kashmiri literary output has been majorly published in English and Urdu, the official state language. Kusur, the mother tongue of most Kashmiris, is yet to emerge as a literary language, though there are a few significant authors writing in Kusur. The most prolific and vehement articulation of Kashmiri nationalism and right to self-determination has been done in the English language and Anglophone literary texts. In this case, Kashmiri nationalist writings follow the trajectory of other South Asian nationalisms like that of Indian, Pakistani, and Bangladeshi nationalism, which are majorly done in English. Aga Sahid Ali, the most celebrated poet of Kashmir, is an expatriate Anglophone poet. Ali writes about the pathos of the conflict situation in Kashmir. In a bid to depict the conflict-ridden situation in Kashmir Valley, Kashmiri Anglophone literature has provided a fresh lease of life to Indian Anglophone literature. A whole range of new idioms and language has been created by Kashmiri authors. Basharat Peer aptly refers to the newly emerging linguistic scenario in Kashmir due to the conflict situation, and I'm quoting, "It took the form of acronyms, JKLF, which I have already mentioned, Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, then JKSLF, Jammu and Kashmir Students Liberation Front, then BSF, Border Security Force, CRPF, Central Reserve Police Force, etc. Words like Kalashnikov, light machine guns, militant, soldier, military, army, crossfire, ceasefire have become indispensable to represent Kashmir in the contemporary era. The normalization of violence in Kashmir, thus depicted is so very different from the sophisticated elite world of Anglophone Indian literature, emanating either from diasporic writers residing in the UK or the United States of America, or from the metropolitan cities in India, primarily aestheticizing the globalized urban mise-en-scène. Anglophone Kashmiri literature has come a long way from when Basharat Peer laments the lack of literary narratives from Kashmir in the bookshelves of Delhi. And Aga Shahid Ali's poems provided succor to his lonely existence in Delhi. And he writes, and this is from Curfewed Nights. I turned often to Aga Shahid Ali's poetry. Except for his poems, there were few literary responses from Kashmir that evoked the fear, the tension, the anger, and the whole hopelessness of our experience. Through this assertion, end quote, through this assertion, he undermines the publication of three very significant Pandit literary responses to Kashmir conflict. These are, and this is Firdaus in Flames by H.K. Kaul. It's a long narrative poem by H.K. Kaul, which was published in 1995. Under the Shadows of Militancy by Tej N. Dhar, which was published in 2002. And The Tiger Ladies, a memoir of Kashmir by Sudha Kaul, again published in 2002. These acts of omission and commission on the part of Kashmiri nationalist authors and ideologues will be dealt elaborately later on, and makes Ashutosh Vaishna's observation all the more pertinent. And this is again Ashutosh Vaishna, and I'm quoting from his essay. There are two stories to tell, one from the valley, the other from the migrant camps. Both tales are marked by a deep sense of loss, bitterness, and a virtually complete lack of trust in the government. The difference, however, is that Kashmiri Muslims feel mutilated and defiled by the security forces. The Hindu migrants feel uprooted and betrayed by the government, though clearly several have been defiled by the Hizbul Mujahideen, the leading Islamist group. To Kashmiri Muslims, the security forces are the ugly face of India. To Jammu migrants, the Hizbul Mujahideen are the despicable face of Islam, end quote. These literary responses are contradictory in their representation of the Kashmir conflict and are somewhat indifferent to towards the other. The aftermath of armed insurgency witnessed the efflorescence of Anglophone Kashmiri literature. Some of the significant autobiographical fictional works ideologically in favor of a separate nationhood for Kashmir include, and I've already mentioned some of them, but I'm just giving a broader, longer list. This is include My Days in Prison by Iftikhar Jilani, published in 2005, Curfewed Night by Basharat Peer, 2008, The Collaborator by Mirza Wahid, published in 2011, and The Book of Gold Leaves by the same author, published in 2014. The Half Mother by Shahnaz Bashir, published in 2014 again. Life in the Clock Tower Valley, 2021, by Shakur Rater. Then Farah Bashir's Spring, I guess, Fears of Spring or something like that, has been recently published after 2020, etc. So it is a continuous process of publishing and writing about Kashmir conflict. Kashmiri Pandits have also contributed to the stream of Anglophone Kashmiri literature, though they are primarily critical of the Kashmiri movement for self-determination. It includes, and I've just mentioned, Firdaus in Flames by H.K. Kaul, published in 1995, Under the Shadows of Militancy by Tej N. Dhar, 2002, The Tiger Ladies, a memoir of Kashmir by Sudha Kaul in 2002, The Garden of Solitude by Siddharth Gigu, 2011, Kashmir, Nativity Regained by Ashok K. Kaul in 2011, Our Moon Has Blood Clots by Rahul Pandita, 2013, Residue by Nitasha Kaul, published in 2014, then A Bit of Everything, which is my favorite, by Sandeep Raina, published in 2020. And it's, again, they are also kind of continuously writing. There are new books. In fact, Gigu has written a memoir recently, which was published in 2024 or 25. So it is, again, a continuing, an ongoing process. Many edited volumes have been published, which comprises of essays and short fiction, including Until My Freedom Has Come, The New Intifada in Kashmir by Sanjay Kak, published in 2011, Of Occupation and Resistance, Writings from Kashmir edited by Fahad Shah, published in 2013. It also includes pro-Azadi Pandit writings by Subir Kaul, compiled in Of Gardens and Graves. Then From Home to House, Writings of Kashmiri Pandits in Exile. This was edited by Arvind Gigu and others, published in 2015. Then there is A Long Dream of Home, The Persecution, Exodus, and Exile of Kashmiri Pandits, edited by Siddharth Gigu and Bharat Sharma, published in 2015. And again, various new books have come up. The list of literary works is merely illustrative and not exhaustive, since it is a heterogeneous and ever-expanding corpus of literature with diverse thematic/political concerns. Now, one of the major things that this literature is focused on is how to narrate the Kashmiri nation. So narrating the nation is actually a very, very important aspect of what they're doing. Please excuse me. So narrating the nation, which is the focus of my next section, Kashmiri nationalist writers create a distinct national space, both geographically and culturally, through their writings. Nationalist writers like Nitasha Kaul demarcate the geographical and political space of the nation of Kashmir as distinct from India, Pakistan, and China in her writings. In her essay, Kashmir, A Place of Blood and Memory, she writes, and I'm quoting, this is a somewhat longish quote, but it is also very relevant in the context of imagining Kashmir in the contemporary times. And I'm quoting, parts of the present-day Kashmir are occupied by India, Pakistan, and China. When you try to locate the territory of Kashmir on a world map, you will find it partitioned into Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, POK, called Azad Kashmir, and northern areas in Pakistan, India-occupied Kashmir, IOK, called Jammu and Kashmir, including Ladakh in India, and areas such as Aksai Chin and Saksham Valley under Chinese control, a part of Xinjiang Autonomous Region in China. Yet, even as it is devoured by the big states that surround it, Kashmir cannot be understood through the simplistic framing of India versus Pakistan, Hindu versus Muslim, or China allied with Pakistan versus India. Instead, Kashmir should be seen as a vital link in the Himalayan mountain chain, a historic part of the Silk Route that is now a violent battleground. Why? Because none of the people in these three regions primarily identify themselves as Pakistani, Indian, or Chinese, and neither should they be forced to. Cartography may lie, but topography and cultural geography does not. Kashmir is not India. Kashmir is not Pakistan. Kashmir is not China. Kashmir is the boundary zone of India, China, Pakistan. It is distinctively Kashmir, and its people, whatever their religion or national identity, are Kashmiris, end quote. Now, this is a very politically expedient quote, okay? It's very interesting how Kaul has demarcated the geographical boundary of Kashmir. Kaul's detailed delineation of the regions comprising the putative nation of Kashmir is historically significant and politically expedient and opportunistic. Contrary to the clarity and vehemence expressed by Kaul, there is a significant amount of confusion and obfuscation regarding the term Kashmir and Kashmiris, depending on political/national/regional affiliation. For Kashmiri nationalist authors such as Kaul, Peer, that is Basharat Peer, and others, it encompasses the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir, as well as Pakistan-administered Kashmir, while for people residing in Jammu and Ladakh, Kashmir refers to the valley. And depending on the context, non-Kashmiri Indians refers to the valley as well as the state of Jammu and Kashmir when they use the term Kashmir. So it's interesting how, Kashmir has different signifiers and, and for different people. Post-1990s, Kashmiri nationalists, both ideologues and armed militants, draw their lineage from the anti-Dogra protests of 1931, prior to Kashmir's incorporation in the Indian Union. While the Dogra regime is criticized vehemently by Kashmiri nationalist/secessionist politicians and authors for institutionalizing myriad mechanisms of oppression, suppression, and exploitation, and the subsequent economic inequities generated between the Kashmiri Pandits and the Muslims in the valley, the putative nation imagined by them denotes the geographical extent of the Dogra kingdom. The regions mentioned by Kaul came under a singular and distinct political entity only during the Dogra rule. The geographical extent of the Kashmiri nation in Kaul's conception is similar to that of the most pro-independence militant groups, including the massively popular Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, that is JKLF. According to scholars like Chitralekha Jutsi and Mridu Rai, and even Sumantro Bose, who has written a very interesting book, Kashmir Conflict in the 21st Century, the concept of a distinct Kashmiri identity gained currency in the wake of an alien ruler from Jammu thrust upon Kashmiri people by the Treaty of Amritsar in 1846. That is when the Dogra regime came into being, the Dogra dynasty. Hence, the political unification of politically hostile Jammu and Ladakh regions within the putative Kashmiri nation is very problematic. Another mode of representing Kashmir, the putative nation, is through the use of cultural and natural symbols unique to the valley. Repetitive descriptions of the scenic beauty of Kashmir, the beautiful gardens of Srinagar, chinar leaves, the reference to Kangri, Firan, Kewa, the Kashmiri tea that is, and papier-mâché artists and patterns evoke a distinct cultural identity for the Kashmiri nation, distinct from India, represented as the tyrannical occupying force and an alien space. Basharat Peer describes his first journey outside the valley as entering into an alien and harsh space. And I'm quoting, this is from Curfewed Night. Everything, from the railway station to the train berths to the people around us, was different. I was uneasy, awkward, and conscious of my ignorance of simple things like closing a train window or unfolding a berth. And the weather was brutal, hot and humid. My face burnt, and my sweat-drenched shirt stuck to my back, end quote. Kashmiri Sufism is also highlighted with frequent references to Charare Sharif, the 600 years old shrine of Nuruddin Rishi, the patron saint of Kashmir in most narratives. Frequent references to Lal Deed, Nuruddin, Kalhana, and others evoke the rich cultural heritage of Kashmir. There is a characteristic difference between the valorization of Kashmiri history by the nationalist Kashmiri authors with that of the Orientalist British, German, and Hungarian historians working under the tutelage of the erstwhile Dogra Darbar. They were busy projecting a characteristic Hindu past for Kashmir. This is basically I've taken from Ananya Janarakabe's famous book, Territory of Desire. The pro-Azadi authors project a syncretic history of Kashmir with special reference to the contribution of Islam in Kashmir. Kashmiri nationalist writers like Kaul, that is Natasha Kaul, or Basharat Peer, construct Kashmir as a distinct geocultural space and simultaneously portrays India as an alien space in order to validate the nationalist claims of a separate nationhood for Kashmir. On the one hand, these nationalist resistance narratives negate any heterogeneity and inconsistency within the putative Kashmiri nation. And on the other hand, they also create a monolithic representation of India, primarily represented through Indian soldiers, bunkers, torture centers, and army cantonments. Ironically, the Pandit narratives, though politically inimical towards armed resistance for self-determination, also evokes a distinct cultural space while describing Kashmir as opposed to Jammu or other parts of North India where they were forced to relocate. Even in this mode of representing Kashmir, cultural markers and symbols of the valley gets preponderance, though Kashmiri nationalist authors, as well as ideologues, claims a separate nationhood for Kashmir with Jammu, Ladakh, and Pakistan-administered Kashmir as constituent parts. So there is a preponderance of the valley in even ideology, symbol, and political agendas, okay, in the Kashmiri nationalism. The emotive representation of the line of control in Kashmiri literature as the unnatural division of the Kashmiri nation is based on Kashmiri nationalist claim of cultural distinctness and putative political unity of the federal state of Jammu and Kashmir, as well as Pakistan-administered Kashmir. Mirza Waid's novel, The Collaborator, and A.G. Aither's short story, The Enemy, portray the line of control in their writings. The line of control, named as such since the Shimla Agreement between India and Pakistan in 1972, has emerged as the de facto international border between India and Pakistan. Aither's crisp and poignant representation of the line of control is premised on the Kashmiri nationalist ideology and belief that it artificially divides the Kashmiri nation. The story of two brothers living across the river Neelam, separated by the line of control and forbidden from meeting each other, is representative of the geopolitical status of the Kashmiri nation, being obstructed from efflorescence by the competing and mutually hostile nation states of India and Pakistan. When forbidden from meeting his brother on the Pakistani side, the brother from the Indian side states, and I'm quoting, "No, no, sir, I'm not an Indian. Neither am I a Pakistani. I'm only a Kashmiri. Do you see, sir, that log hut in Kiran? That is my home. And you see that log hut on the other bank? That is where my brother lives." End quote. This is from Aither's short story. This politically charged statement symbolizes the constructedness of national identity. This poignant utterance valorizes regional identity over national identities constructed through historically contingent situations in South Asia in the event of British departure and subsequent political events like partition and Kabyle invasion. It may seem politically resistant and emancipatory, but thoroughly negates history. It emotively clamors for sovereign nationhood for Kashmir, but negates similar popular support for union with Indian state in the late 40s of the last century. It also negates the popular support among major sections of the Kashmiri populace for Kashmir's merger with Pakistan since the mid-20th century. Mirza Waid also depicts the line of control as separating families, preventing their union. This is from the novel The Collaborator. Muhammad's father, Javed Chaudhary, whose ancestors were originally from Neelam Valley in Pakistan, was the only foreign national in the village. Baba sometimes joked. Although I wondered, some families did have quite a few near and distant relatives on the other side of the border. But you've never met them, of course. Among other things, the line of control also curtailed bonding of the blood, prevented contact between brothers and sisters, mothers and daughters, fathers and sons, as if it were a sin. End quote. So this is almost reminiscent of our partition, I mean, how partition stories were written by Manto and others. The representation of Kashmiri brothers or relatives residing on either side of the border line of control represents the arbitrariness of the line of ceasefire between India and Pakistan, which separated families, bifurcated villages in Kashmir. Similarly, this emotive representation also negates the contingency of border formation in general and the creation of the erstwhile Dogra Principality by the Treaty of Amritsar in 1846 in particular. The epilogue of Peer's memoir, Curfewed Night, delineates the emotionally surcharged inauguration of the Srinagar-Muzaffarabad bus service across the line of control in a bid to connect Pakistan-administered Kashmir with Indian-administered Kashmir. And Peer writes, and I'm quoting, "And the people were talking about the bus. India and Pakistan had begun a peace process with little progress over a year. Now they had agreed to open a bus service between Srinagar and Muzaffarabad. After 58 years, a bus would cross the LOC and divided families would be allowed to visit each other. Historic and hope became much used words," end quote. Cynicism is evident in his description. Yet the end of the epilogue talks about Sharif Hussain Bukhari, who met his siblings after a long hiatus of 60 years. Depiction of the line of control is reminiscent of the tradition of partition narratives representing the division of Indian subcontinent into the nation states of India and Pakistan. The line of control is also a site of massive militarization due to the recurrent hostilities between India and Pakistan. Militarization of the area vitiates civilian life as portrayed in The Collaborator, which shows the destruction of a Gujjar village named Nagaon. situated near the line of control. It is also represented as the site of competitive hostilities perpetuated by both the Indian and Pakistani states. Mirza Waid provides a graphic description of the inane violence perpetrated by the hostile armies in the surrounding areas. And I'm quoting again from the collaborator. They're pummeling the forest ground, burning the mossy earth, making scorching holes in the green, uprooting pines, deodars, and firs, and hurling their gnarled branches and roots and burnt berries and blossoms far, far away into the darkness. Sometimes I think the LOC is like a fireworks exhibition for them, you know, where they compete to decide who has the better display, who shoots the highest, who lights the brightest, who burns the furthest. Really, sometimes I think it's just that. And the poor boys who get caught up in the fiery frenzy are just tinder. End quote. The line of control has also been projected by Kashmiri nationalist ideologues and armed militants as the gateway to Azad Kashmir, literally free Kashmir, and then to Pakistan, where the Kashmiri demand for nationhood and resistance against the Indian state is acknowledged and actively supported. There seems to be a preoccupation with the line of control, symbolized by the repetitive representation of the line of control and bordering areas in literary texts. The central protagonist of the collaborator almost yearns to cross the border for a military training. This is what he utters at a moment of supreme desire. I too wished to go Sarhad Par now, that I too wish to cross the border. End quote. Both the collaborator and the Book of Gold Leaves provide vivid description of areas surrounding the line of control and Kashmiri armed militants crossing over to Pakistan or India. There's a characteristic centrality accorded to the city of Srinagar in all these novels, mostly represented as a militarized city, as well as the epicenter of armed resistance. Srinagar, the capital of the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir, is imagined as the capital of the putative Kashmiri nation. Basharat Pir's description of the political situation subtly accords Srinagar a position of significance, and I'm quoting again from Curfewed Nights. By February 1990, Kashmir was in the midst of a full-blown rebellion against India. News on the radio became the news of defiance and death. Protests followed killings, and killings followed protests. News came from Srinagar that hundreds of thousands of people had marched to pray for independence at the shrine of the patron saint of Kashmir, Nuruddin Rishi, in a town an hour away from Srinagar. End quote. Srinagar is represented as a city where civic life have been vitiated with violence, mass slaughter, protests, curfew, and vans. Basharat's description of Srinagar is reminiscent of Aga Shahid Ali's poignant poem Farewell, where Ali describes the bleak political situation of Kashmir. And I'm quoting from the poem, they make a desolation and call it peace. When you left, even the stones were buried. The defenseless would have no weapons. My memory is again in the way of your history. Army convoys all night like desert caravans. In the smoking oil of dimmed headlights, time dissolved. All winter, it crushed fennel. Detailed description of mass slaughter on Srinagar's many bridges in most of the narratives evoke pathos. The major trope of depicting Srinagar is through the debris of armed conflict, like military trucks, barbed wire, and ubiquitous presence of armed personnel, and as the site of state as well as militant terror. This mode of representing Srinagar is in stark contrast to the representation of the city through its parks and lakes and as a tourist haven till the onset of the armed conflict. If you have seen any of those Hindi movies of the 1960s, where they show all the gardens of Srinagar and it has a pleasure, as a locus or as a site of pleasure for metropolitan youths. So, in contrast to that, now the city is like an armed conflict zone with barbed wires, etc. Commenting on Srinagar's predicament in the aftermath of the conflict, Ananya Jahanara Kabir writes, and I'm quoting, with the tourist economy having dwindled to nothingness for 15 years during the height of conflict, the departure of different groups of Kashmiris from the valley under various forms of pressure, the choking of daily life thanks to the long-standing presence of the Indian Army, and the demands made on public space by reactive pro-Kashmiri and pro-Islamic groups. Srinagar today is socially and culturally repressed. Emblazoned with arrested modernity, psychological violence, and urban decay, its deeply depressing ambience mocks the long tradition, both Kashmiri and non-Kashmiri, of celebrating the natural beauty of the valley, in which it nestles. End quote. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the ambiguities of inclusion, because inclusion is also one of the themes on which this lecture is hinged on. So the next section of my lecture is titled as Ambiguities of Inclusion. Apart from the modalities of narrating the Kashmiri nation, Anglophone Kashmiri literature also expresses dissenting political ideologies while engaging with the events of 1947. The foundational moment of the Indian nation state in 1947 has emerged as the central thematic concern in Anglophone Kashmiri literature. In the context of Kashmir, a polarized public sphere ensures that perception about political events is always narrated through the prism of communal predicament/interest, occasionally leading to diametrically opposing modes of representation. This is very interesting, and I'm just repeating the sentence. In the context of Kashmir, a polarized public sphere ensures that perception about political events is always narrated through the prism of communal predicament/interest, occasionally leading to diametrically opposing modes of representation. For Anglophone Kashmiri literature, ideologically in favor of a separate Kashmiri nation, the moment of decolonization for the Indian subcontinent is not that of jubilation, but a moment of lost possibility. Occasionally, 1947 is also represented as the moment of Kashmir's colonization by the Indian state, since Indian army was sent to thwart the advance of the Kabyle raiders from the northwest frontier province of Pakistan. This is in stark contrast to the sense of euphoria which characterizes cultural representations of India's independence from colonial rule in literary cultural productions in general and Indian English literature in particular. Instead of being celebratory, reference to 1947 is mired in political claims and contestations and marked with despondency and frustration. Shahnaz Bashir's politically sensitive novel, The Half-Mother, represents this through the discontent expressed by Abjan, one of the characters, in his youth.
Jelena, can you please unmute?
I'm sorry, I'll just unmute them. Give me a minute.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll mute them.
Yeah, so I'll just go a little further backwards
Yes.
This is in stark contrast to the sense of euphoria which characterizes cultural representation of India's independence from colonial rule in literary cultural productions in general and Indian English literature in particular. Instead of being celebratory, reference to 1947 is mired in political claims and contestations and marked with despondency and frustration. Shahnaz Bashir's politically sensitive novel, The Half-Mother, represents this through the discontent expressed by Abjan in his youth. Abjan is a character, an elderly person in the novel. And I'm quoting from the novel. In his youth, he had been a radical Shia, an ardent supporter of Sheikh Abdullah. Abjan had even gone to jail once for 6 months. But then one evening, after listening to Abdullah's speech on the radio, in which the Sher-e-Kashmir expressed a willingness to support the accession with India, Abjan was disappointed. In a bout of anger, he threw out the larger-than-life portrait of Abdullah for his
Hello, I request the participants to please mute yourself throughout the talk. I can't find this participant who is talking. Uh,
Hi. Yeah.
Yeah, so may I continue now?
yes, sir, you may continue. Sorry
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
interruption, sir.
This discontent anticipates events of the 1990s with the radicalization of Kashmiri nationalism when Sheikh Abdullah's legacy was delegitimized and National Conference discredited as a pro-India political organization. Discontent with the Indian state became the dominant political mood in Kashmir after Abdullah's incarceration in 1953 and took a turn towards violence with the establishment of Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, that is JKLF, by Amanullah Khan and Maqbul Bhatt in 1977, which I had mentioned earlier. Most Kashmiri Anglophone literature is extremely critical of Kashmiri politicians in support of status quo in Kashmir and glorifies the militant figure. Now, status quo in the context of Kashmir would actually mean its merger with India, which is the current political situation. The Instrument of Accession of 1947, signed by Hari Singh, remains the most contested historical document in the context of Kashmir. Indian claims over Kashmir is based on the Instrument of Accession executed by Maharaja Hari Singh, while Pakistan claims Kashmir on the basis of its overwhelming Muslim majority population. Kashmiri populace demands azadi from Indian state on the basis of India's failure to conduct the plebiscite recommended by the United Nations and promised by Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India. While these claims and counterclaims have some truth in them, the evolution of Kashmiri nationalism since the 1930s remains thoroughly neglected. Fictional rendition of this moment also negates the contingent nature of nation, nationality, and international borders. In 1947, both the Maharaja and their popular leader, Sheikh Abdullah, supported Kashmir's inclusion into the Indian Union, and Pakistan was deemed as the aggressor because of Kabali invasion. The present political leadership of Kashmiri armed resistance and their followers ignore Sheikh Abdullah's role and popularity during the 1940s and considers Indian presence as colonization of Kashmir. The general Kashmiri populace, taking cue from the massive military presence in Kashmir since the onset of armed resistance, conceptualizes India as a colonizing force. There is general amnesia regarding India's beneficial role during Kabali invasion in the public psyche of Kashmir. Kashmiri nationalist authors try to sideline historical facts and provide a skewed representation of history. In fact, most of the novels and non-fictional prose tend to focus a lot on history because history, of course, as you know, talk about the collective self. Kashmiri nationalist scholars Arif Ayaz Pare puts forward a historically faulty and politically banal argument in his otherwise well-written essay titled Kashmir, Three Metaphors for the Present. That is the title of the essay, and I'm quoting from the essay. The country Jammu and Kashmir, in its current form, was born in 1846 when the British sold it to Maharaja Gulab Singh, while the country India, in its current form, was born only in 1947. How can the struggle for ending the occupation of a country by another country, which is 101 years younger to it, be a secessionist movement? End quote. Such assertions are not uncommon in many of the pro-Azadi literary narratives with staunch Kashmiri nationalist characters. These hyper-nationalist assertions are ahistorical and merely propagandist in nature. They are reiteratively striven in literary writings in order to counter and delegitimize the official narrative of the Indian state, which considers Kashmir as an integral part of the Indian nation state. In response to the official position of the Indian state, Nitasha Kaul, whom I have already quoted earlier, a diasporic Kashmiri Pandit scholar, labels Kashmir as India's disputed integral. These words are from her essay, disputed integral. Basharat Pir provides a more balanced view of the historical events in Kashmir, leading to its accession to India. In fact, most of the narratives have their own versions of these events. And I'm quoting from Basharat Pir. Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah preferred India to Pakistan and an independent Kashmir to both. When India was violently partitioned in 1947, Both Singh and Sheikh Abdullah sought time before deciding Kashmir's fate. In October 1947, however, tribesmen from the northwest frontier province of Pakistan, supported by Pakistani army, invaded Kashmir, forcing their hands. Singh decided to join India, and Sheikh Abdullah, who was a friend of the new Indian Prime Minister Nehru, supported him. In January 1949, the fighting stopped after the UN intervened. The UN endorsed a plebiscite for Kashmiris to determine which country they wanted to belong to and created a ceasefire line. End quote. While the version of political events of 1947-48 differs in different literary narratives, the seminal importance accorded to the events cannot be denied. The year of 1947, though not celebrated, holds significance for the region and is represented in Kashmiri literature. Rahul Pandita writes about the pride of the Kashmiri Pandit community, owing to the fact that Jawaharlal Nehru, a Kashmiri Pandit, became the first Prime Minister of the newly minted nation state of India. The Pandit narratives primarily focus on Qabali invasion while narrating the events of 1947. The cataclysmic political events of 1947 may be a lost opportunity for Kashmiri nationalist ideologues, authors, and the majority of Kashmiri Muslims in favor of a separate nationhood for Kashmir. For the Kashmiri Pandits, it was a moment of profound fear, dislocation, and loss of preeminence in Kashmiri society. The significance of the period may be surmised from the narrative space devoted to the delineation of events from 1947 in literature published in the aftermath of the armed conflict and Kashmiri Pandit exodus from the valley in the 1990s. Rahul Pandita devotes a section on the events of 1947 in Baramulla, a town in Kashmir devastated by the Qabali raid. He documents the predicament of Kashmiri Pandit families who were forced to flee from their homes in search of security and to safeguard their valuables. During the Dogra period, that is from 1846 to 1947, the Kashmiri Pandit community constituted the most privileged section of Kashmiri society as the landed aristocracy and were commonly inducted into the Dogra bureaucracy. The decolonization of the Indian subcontinent, coupled with the dissolution of Dogra monarchy, saw the advent of democracy in Kashmir Valley, when the Kashmiri Pandit community lost their preeminence and the majority community of the Kashmiri Muslims reaped the benefits of socio-political events of 1947. Now, this, the dominance of the majority, so to speak, in Kashmir was also furthered by Sheikh Abdullah's policy, which he enshrined in the new policy document, Naya Kashmir, which was basically a reorganization of the land ownership patterns, etc., where landlords were forced to give their land to the peasants. And in the context of Kashmir, since most of the landlords were Hindus, it became a religiously significant social phenomena as well, because Hindu landlords, Kashmiri Pandit landlords, had to give away their land to Kashmiri Muslim peasants. Anyway, so I've given a brief understanding of how the nation is narrated and also the various ambiguities, let's say, of inclusion of Kashmir into the into the Indian nation state, so to speak. And of course, the claims and counterclaims of inclusion, of the dissent, of resistance, and of course, somewhat communal bent of representation of various events. Now, I'll come back to the overarching, point of inclusion of Anglophone Kashmiri literature within the broader rubric of Indian English literature, which is actually the main point that I'm trying to prove in the lecture or in the paper, so to speak. So the next section is titled Situating Anglophone Kashmiri Literature within Indian English Literature. Very, this is how I'm trying to sort of situate them. Indian English literature, a genre that began as furtive literary attempts by the minuscule section of Anglicized elite during the colonial period, variously termed as the perishable empire, or, and I'm quoting, slender sapling from a foreign field, end quote, has developed into a flourishing genre with global reputation. It has developed into a heterogeneous body of literature with significant divergences in their thematic concern as well as sites of production, publication, and dissemination. International accolades and global fame has increased its prestige both at home and abroad, thereby encouraging writers to take up divergent themes for their literary explorations. The trajectory of the genre has been interesting from the point of view of literary historiography, as stated by Hans Harder, one of the scholars of Indian literature, who teaches at Heidelberg University in Germany. And I'm quoting from his essay: English literature written by Indians becomes as a challenge to Indian literary historiography. The basic problem any history of this literature has to come to terms with and cannot help dealing with, even after the great recent successes of Indian writers in English, is the somewhat paradoxical status of the English language in India. On the one hand, there is no way to avoid the claim that English is originally not an Indian, but a foreign language. On the other hand, English is the only language that can, at present, claim the status of an all-India language. Furthermore, it is English rather than any particular Indian language that became the medium of the Indian national struggle for independence. End quote. Now, this is the kind of dichotomy that we all know, we all face, especially the ones who teach English literature or English language in the country. Notwithstanding creative employment of the erstwhile colonizers' language, the genre of Indian English literature has shown impeccable nationalist credentials. Beginning with Henry Louis Vivian Derosio's poems on India, like To India, My Native Land, which was written in the 1830s, to the Gandhian nationalist musings of Indian English novelists like Mulk Raj Anand, Raja Rao, or R.K. Narayan of the 1930s, because we have these Gandhian novels, one after the other. Mulk Raj Anand's, Untouchable has Gandhi as a character. Raja Rao's Kantapura Gandhi is almost like an omnipresent, character in the novel, though he does not appear in the novel. Then R.K. Narayan also has a novel called Waiting for the Mahatma, where Mahatma Gandhi is a character. So, these nationalist musings of the 1930s and 40s and thereafter. Contemporary writers such as Arundhati Roy, Shashi Tharoor, Amitav Ghosh, Rohinton Mistry, and even the more recent Upamanyu Chatterjee, to name a few, from the illustrious pantheon, have all dealt with the theme of nationalism and the Indian nation, or its critique in some sense or the other, in their creative and polemical writings. In fact, Indian English literature has done justice to its nomenclature, being primarily about India in the broadest sense possible, since English, apart from its constitutional position as the associate official language of the country, is the only language intelligible across the length and breadth of the nation, unlike other regional Indian languages. This attribute of national reach accorded a national character to the literature produced in the genre, which, according to the critic Meenakshi Mukherjee, is characterized by an anxiety of Indianness. According to her, Anglophone Indian literature, and I'm quoting, pull towards a homogenization of reality, an essentializing of India, a certain flattening out of the complicated and conflicting contours, the ambiguous and shifting relations that exist between individuals and groups in a plural community. End quote. This is from her essay, The Anxiety of Indianness. The ever-burgeoning corpus of Anglophone Kashmiri literature certainly exudes an anxiety of Indianness, though of a very different nature than the one elaborated by Meenakshi Mukherjee. The primary concern generally expressed in the corpus is non-existent / ambiguous sense of belonging to the Indian nation state, as illustrated earlier in this lecture. Any literary production in English originating within the territorial boundary of India should ideally be incorporated in Indian English literature. Due to the preponderance of diasporic authors in Indian English canon, any literary work written by authors of Indian origin is generally considered as belonging to the genre of Indian English literature. According to Azaz Ahmed, the unity of Indian literature, and I'm quoting, resides in the common national origins of its authors and the common civilizational ethos of the Indian people. This is from his essay, Indian Literature, Notes Towards a Definition, okay? So I'm quoting it again. According to Azaz Ahmed, the unity of Indian literature and I'm quoting, resides in the common national origins of its authors and the common civilizational ethos of the Indian people, end quote. In fact, defining a national literary tradition like the Indian English one is always going to be an untenable one due to the heterogeneity of the corpus and the contingent nature of what constitutes the category of nation and national literature. By the simple logic of territoriality, Anglophone Kashmiri literature is certainly a constituent part of Indian English literature, since Kashmir continues to be a part of the Indian nation state, irrespective of the dissident political aspirations of majority of Kashmiris. The problem of inclusion is more apparent in the thematic and ideological considerations of Anglophone Kashmiri literature. Meenakshi Mukherjee enumerates the common thematic concern of Indian English literature in her article, The Anxiety of Indianness. She writes, and I'm quoting, novelists in English had for a long time remained predictably pan-Indian. The national movement, partition of the country, the clash between tradition and modernity, faith and rationality, or similar time-worn cliches of East-West confrontation, disintegration of the joint family, exploitation of women, etc. In this project, they were in a way defining Indian concerns as against local or regional issues, end quote. If themes recommended by Mukherjee are taken into consideration, then Kashmiri Anglophone literature does dwell on some of these. Anglophone Kashmiri literature deals with themes that are pan-Indian in scope, since the primary concern of the genre is to muse about the Indian nation state and the legitimacy of its presence in the state of Jammu and Kashmir in general and the Kashmir Valley in particular. The foundation of the Indian state and the political events leading to the inclusion of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir in 1947 remains the central focus of this politically radical genre. Kashmir has remained central to the nation-building process in India, and its inclusion not only augmented the territorial extent of the Indian state, but also bolstered its secular credentials, since the state of Jammu and Kashmir is the only Muslim-majority state of the Indian Union. Anglophone Kashmiri literature, ideologically in favor of Azadi for Kashmir, is virulently critical of the Indian state and advocates secession from Indian Union. It is rather problematic to include a corpus of literature within a national literary tradition, which ideologically advocates secession from the national body politic. The resolution of this political conundrum, the resolution of this political conundrum embedded in the literary aesthetic domain lies in gauging the reception of Anglophone Kashmiri literature in the Indian public sphere. In a bid to depict the conflict-ridden situation in Kashmir Valley, Kashmiri Anglophone literature has invented new idioms and language, giving a new lease of life to the domain of Indian English literature. Words like Kalashnikov, light machine guns, militant, soldier, army, crossfire, ceasefire have become indispensable to represent Kashmir, and are liberally scattered in these narratives. The normalization of violence in Kashmir, thus depicted, is so very different from the sophisticated elite world of Anglophone Indian literature, which is primarily, and this I have already stated, which is primarily about the urban, modernity, etc. The charm of this novel, linguistic/political experience, was not lost to the Indian reading public, leading to the popularity of writers such as Basharat Peer, Mirza Wahid, Farah Bashir, and Shakur Rathir, etc. There are many others. Basharat Peer went on to win the Vodafone Crossword Book Award in 2008 in the non-fiction category. Anglophone Kashmiri literature has been extensively reviewed and widely circulated in respectable newspaper magazines like Outlook, India Today, Literary Review of the Hindu, etc. It is also interesting that the Sahitya Academy Library of New Delhi, which is actually a government institution, also holds copies of popular Anglophone Kashmiri literature, notwithstanding its politically vociferous ideology. Sahitya Academy, the National Academy of Letters, is funded by the Ministry of Culture of the Government of India. Therefore, in terms of reception, acceptance, and popularity of this literary category, there is no problem in its inclusion in the broader rubric of Indian English literature. The basic argument in this political conundrum, and that is what I'm just trying to establish, though I don't know how successful I am. The basic argument in this political conundrum is the feasibility and degree of dissent/secessionist politics that Indian national literary tradition is willing to incorporate in the literary aesthetic domain. Dissent, as defined by Romila Thapar, is, and I'm quoting, the disagreement that a person or persons may have with others, or more publicly, with some of the institutions that govern their patterns of life, end quote. In fact, Anglophone Kashmiri literature began with the purpose of dissenting against Indian official discourses and Indian nationalist imaginary. It is also noteworthy that the freedom of expression guaranteed by the Constitution of India is not an absolute right and comes with checks and balances. Besides, another pertinent question is to what extent dissent may be allowed in the context of democracy as a political institution and its literary cultural traditions. Nation, theorized as an imagined community by Benedict Anderson, has the political necessity of survival once the nation has formed a state. If a literary tradition seeks to delegitimize the nation state in a bid to validate a new political community or form a new nation or a new public, how may it be considered a part and parcel of the national literary tradition? The question here is more political in nature and beyond the scope of literary aesthetic domain. So I'm reaching my conclusion. So it's like this, okay? And I'm not reaching a conclusion in the sense that there is now there is no one way of looking at it. That is, Indian English literature has categorically validated the Indian nation during the anti-colonial nationalist resistance and continued to aestheticize the Indian state thereafter. In spite of various authors critiquing different strands of Indian society, as well as modus operandi of the Indian state, like the fictions of emergency era, etc., even Rohinton Mistry has written such scathing critique of the Indian state, etc., they have more or less remained preoccupied with India as the central theme in their creative endeavors. Similarly, Anglophone Kashmiri literature has been steadfast in creating cultural legitimacy for the Kashmiri nationalist movement and in the process vehemently critiqued the Indian state and its mode of operation in Kashmir. The genre is primarily geared towards highlighting Kashmir's distinctness vis-a-vis the Indian nation state. The question of its inclusion is beyond the domain of the literary aesthetic and primarily remains a political one. Anglophone Kashmiri literature may be considered as a subgenre of Indian English literature since it does have shared concern though with diametrically opposing ideologies and political goals. So I'm just repeating this once more. The question of its inclusion is beyond the domain of the literary aesthetic and remain primarily a political one. Anglophone Kashmiri literature may be considered a subgenre of Indian English literature since it does have shared concerns, though with diametrically opposing ideologies and political goals. Now, in the larger question, and this is something that I did not write down as such, but in the larger question of Kashmir vis-a-vis India, which is the political question that I am not trying to deal in the lecture as such, but I think that a certain kind of concluding remark is necessary, is that Kashmir, whatever be the political aspirations of its populace or a large segment of its populace, is certainly everybody is not against the Indian state, but a large segment is. Now, whatever be the political aspirations, Kashmir is still geopolitically in the Indian state, within the borders of the Indian state, within the territorial extent of the Indian state. And recently, after the abolition of Article 370 and Article 35A of the Indian Constitution, there has been repeated assertions from the government circles that these have been abolished in order to integrate Kashmir, quote unquote, integrate Kashmir into the mainstream. And in order to bolster these claims, etc., the Indian Railways have also created engineering marvels to reach Srinagar, etc. You have all heard of the Chenab River Bridge, etc. And now railways moving on Kashmir, etc., which are all part of the state's endeavor to integrate the dissident part of the country. And since in the context of this FDP, where we are talking about Viksit Bharat document of 2047, etc., I mean, India will never become Viksit, that is, developed, unless we take into consideration all the constituent parts, of which Kashmir is one. So is the Northeast, so to speak. Since I'm located in the Northeast here, I just thought of mentioning it. So, I mean, we have to include Kashmir and try to integrate it to the nation in whichever way possible. And the endeavor from the government is there, it's visible. And in terms of literary narratives also, I mean, they are very much part and parcel of the Indian ethos, and critiquing the government is very much a part and parcel of you know, literary activities. I mean, we have a long tradition of critiquing the government, the colonial government during the colonial times, and now in the post-independence era, even bureaucrat writers like Upamanu Chatterjee, Shashi Tharoor, and others, they have also critiqued the structure of the state, etc. So if they are much feted, awarded in the context of Indian literary scene, then why not Anglophone Kashmiri literature? Though they have a different kind of political dissidence than these authors, who are very much part of the establishment, but are also critical. So there is no one way of going about it. Rather, there are various different perspectives to look at. So I would like to conclude here. So over to you, Dr. S. Ramya, or
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, madam. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Yes, we are marching towards Viksit Bharat 2047, which means we are going to pull in ropes from all sides and walk ahead. On that note, the floor is now open for questions. So such
Ma'am, may I?
initiatives like, yes, Monica. Yes, ma'am.
Sir, first of all, I'll have to appreciate this informative and thoughtful lecture which you have delivered now. It was wonderful listening to lots of details with the years, the history, which we were not actually knowing about. But I do like to share an incident which happened in my classroom. So I have had a student who was like carrying a strong dislike for both Indians and Pakistanis. He's from Kashmir. He was from Kashmir. And what he told me was he had come to India to learn the language so that he could build his career and he could avenge on India. So I was like really surprised about his ulterior motive. Like he was in India and still he wanted to avenge. And later I came to know that he was angry because his sister was slapped by an Indian soldier at a checkpoint when she delayed searching for the identity card from her handbag. And from that moment, he believed that all the Indians were also like that particular soldier. So he wanted to like avenge on India, and he said, "Ma'am, if I get 2 bombs, first bomb I'll just drop it on Pakistan. Second one I'll drop it on India." That is what he said. So I could literally see that anger and frustration in him. And but later, after coming to India, he met so many people over here, and slowly his perception about India and Indians also changed. But still, he was in every talk that he had delivered in the classroom, he was only talking about Kashmir's Azadi. And he does not want Kashmir to be part of India. I could literally see that anger in him, though he started liking Indians, but still there was this anger inside him which did not let him develop any sort of liking towards India, and he did not want Pakistan to be part of India. So I could see that anger. So now my question to you is, sir, are there differences in how conflict is portrayed? Conflict is portrayed in local language narrative versus the Anglophone narrative. Do you find a great difference between them?
Well, first and foremost, I don't know for sure. I'm not a Kashmiri, okay? So I don't know the local language. And the local language is not so much literary language in Kashmir. In fact, it is Urdu where most of the writing gets done. But there are some writers in Kosur as well, which I had mentioned in the early part of my presentation. Now, the point is there are some translations. Okay, some things have been translated and I have read them. And I would say that not much difference. Not much difference. But of course, Anglophone Kashmiri literature is meant for a wider reading public, both in India, Pakistan, and abroad. So yes, there are ways of, they try to kind of, for instance, a reference to Palestine and all, very common in Kashmiri literary narratives. Now that may not be such a common thing in, local language narratives because they don't have to compare themselves with Gaza or Palestine, which is a very common feature in Anglophone. So these are some of the ways, but because you are trying to get to a wider reading public, especially the international writer, international readers. So you tend to sort of give a certain kind of comparison, etc., to internationalize the movement. And this is, of course, this literature has a certain kind of anxiety to reach out to the wider global audience because they think that Indian state is oppressing them, which is not so untrue either. But then there are also complexities associated with that. So it's not like, one fine day our soldiers thought that, kya chalo karte hai, kya, let's go to Kashmir and wreak havoc. It's not that also, no. So there are militant activities, there are anti-state activities, which is again the state comes up with a larger force of repression. So it is a claim, counterclaim. It is a conflict in medias res. So talking about it is also very different. And in the context of your student, etc., I mean, they are undergoing rage against the state, primarily because how their life was shaped after the armed insurgency broke out, because then the state tried to stifle every form of public expression of discontent, which did not have a letter. So therefore,
Sir, if I can.
Yes, yes.
I have a question.
Yes, yes.
This is related to our topic. In the sense to Viksit Bharat, you were talking about the Anglophone Kashmiri, right? And you're saying we have to include, yes? So in what ways do you think the narration of lived experiences among the Anglophone Kashmiris would, I mean, in their writings, will it strengthen the idea of an inclusive India? How do you think, because this is one of the core aspirations, as you said, we have to include, isn't it? So what do you think can be, as an educationist, from an education background or field, how are we supposed to pitch in and be a part of aspiring this aspiration of Viksit Bharat 2047?
You mean in the context of Kashmir or generally?
In general, related to Anglophone Kashmiri writings. I'm not talking about Kashmir in India. I'm talking about the writings per se.
Yeah, I mean, see.
The literature per se, just the literature per se.
From the very basics, what I understand, I mean, of course, education is very important for any kind of development in the country. I mean, if we have to become Viksit, we have to be educated. So one of the ways of assuaging the anxiety in Kashmir, etc., or even in the literature, because whatever the public sentiment will be reflected in the literature. So in order to kind of assuage the kind of rage or whatever, the antipathy towards the state, etc., education must be recommended. And Viksit Bharat is only possible if not just education, but also other forms of development, like, for instance, employment generation and infrastructure developments, which the government is doing in great measures in Kashmir and other places, even in the Northeast for that matter. Road connectivity, rail connectivity, air connectivity has massively improved in the last decade. And so there is this whole anxiety of integrating. But contrary, the models of developmental economics, so to speak, if we say, and I'm not from economics, but literary studies, but nonetheless, if one is to look at the models of developmental economics, then we have also bulldozing the kind of local or rather localized versions of modernity or localized versions of existence, which can also pose a threat later on for integration as well as development. Because you cannot bulldoze urban modernity or developmental modernity into a region which already has a bit of political dissidence. So one has to be a little, what should I say, a little uh, tactful rather. And
Okay.
education can be one of the ways of both integration and development, which is what Viksit Bharat is all about. And we are all aspiring to become developed.
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you very much for that answer.
Okay,
And
Me?
yes, yes.
As I'm Annam from Bharat University. Can you talk to
Yes,
sir?
ma'am, please. Yes,
sir,
ma'am, please.
Sir, sir, I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am,
Yes,
you are
yes.
audible.
Yes.
Sir, one question, sir. You gave a wide and elaborate information regarding the history and the issues faced by the people. Very good information, sir. We don't know that much. Really thankful to you. But my question is, you were mentioning about so many writers issues addressing about the issues about marginality, displacement, and human rights in their works. Okay, but my question is, how are these concerns received by the Indians as well as by the global readers? It's
Yeah,
giving any impact on this.
I have mentioned the reception of Anglophone Kashmiri writing in the later part of my presentation, madam. I mean, Basharat Peer received the Vodafone Crossword Award, and the books are there in the Sahitya Academy Library, and they have been reviewed in almost all significant journals and magazines like, Outlook and India Today and etc. So there is a very warm reception of these writings in the literary intelligentsia circles, especially among the left liberal academia, I mean, very, very well received. And you may or may not know that Basharat Peer's wife is Ananya Bajpayee, who works at CSDS in New Delhi. So, they are regular invitees to literary soirees in Delhi, in universities of JNU, DU, etc. So, and Ananya Bajpayee is very active. I mean, so Basharat Peer, of course, is relocated to Istanbul for a while, and then he has come back to Delhi. So I don't think that there is any problem of reception. They're enormously popular and very much feted and, respected, etc. So the reception from the Indian reading public is pretty warm. It's pretty good, actually. But I did mention all this in the later part of my
Globally
presentation.
have any impact on
I don't know if I'm having a lag or.
okay, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much, sir, and thank you to the participants as well. I think we have come to the end of the session. I have already posted the feedback form in the chat box, so I request all the participants to, fill up this feedback form. And I would like to thank Dr. Mirta for being with us today. We are really grateful to have you here with us. And with that, we come to the conclusion of our session. We have another session in the later part of the day again. They do session 2, so I request everyone to join us for the next session as well. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay,
It was
thank you.
really, yeah, thank you so much, sir. It was really lovely to have you here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Thank you.
invitation as well. Okay, then. May I leave now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
I'll end the meet.